My name's Arya Delgado. I'm 20 and halfway through my second year majoring in political science at the University of Oregon. I thought spring break would be a simple 5-hour drive down, I-5 to my hometown of Medford, catch up on sleep, maybe eat some decent food for once, and argue with my mom about my hair color. But nothing could have prepared me for what greeted me when I pulled up to what I thought was still my home. It was empty. Not empty like we're out getting groceries. Empty like erased. No car in the driveway. Curtains gone. Windows dark. A bold red for sale sign stabbed into the front lawn like a warning. It looked unfamiliar and haunted. For one stupid second, I thought maybe I typed in the wrong address. But then I saw the old street lamp leaning slightly left with a chunk missing from the base. I once split my knee open on that thing in 5th grade, chasing my sister with a water gun. That crack? It was mine. No mistake. This was my house. Or it had been. 3 black trash bags sat on the front steps, just sitting there like unwanted leftovers. Heart pounding, I staggered up the porch, the wood creaking under my boots. My hands were already shaking as I untied the first bag. Inside was my red hoodie, a couple of books, and a cracked photo frame from my high school graduation me, wedged between my parents, fake smiles frozen in time. I called my mom. Voicemail. Tried Dad. He picked up on the 3rd ring. Dad? My voice cracked. I'm standing in front of the house. What's going on? He didn't sigh. He didn't ask if I was okay. We moved, he said flatly. You'll figure it out. Wait, what? You moved? When? Why didn't anyone tell me? You're an adult, Arya. Time to act like one. Don't make this dramatic. And then he hung up. Just like that. I stood there, phone clutched to my ear like it might explain everything. But it didn't. All it gave me was silence. No answers. No closure. I tried my younger sister, Camille. Straight to voicemail. Again. And again. By the 5th try, my fingers were trembling so badly I almost dropped the phone. Still nothing. The wind picked up, brushing through the barren oak trees out front, the same trees we used to wrap with string lights every December, even when it rained. This place had been home, even when things were tense, even when I felt invisible. But now, it wasn't mine anymore. Not the porch, not the memories, not even the black trash bags with pieces of my life stuffed inside. I didn't cry, not because I was strong, but because everything had happened so fast, my emotions hadn't caught up. I was running on autopilot as I shoved the bags into the trunk of my car, each one heavier than it had any right to be. That night, I slept in a motel that smelled like dust and disappointment. The blanket was thin. The room was colder than the way Dad had said, "You'll figure it out." I didn't know whether to be angry, sad, or just numb. So I did what I always do. I opened my old laptop, created a folder, and named it Start Over. Inside the bags, I found a few textbooks, a bent journal, my favorite mug, and a scarf Camille knit me one winter when she still thought I was cool. No letter, no goodbye. Not even a sticky note with an apology. Just 3 trash bags and a broken photo frame. I lay awake that night thinking, was I that forgettable? That disposable? Because I tried, really tried. Every month I sent home money from my part-time job at the campus bookstore, even skipped out on dorm parties to wire extra cash when Dad said bills were tight. Never complained, never asked for much. But they didn't throw away Camille, or Mason, my younger brother. Oh no, Mason got the full ride of parental protection. 3 years younger, expelled twice, caught vaping behind school dumpsters, crashed Mom's car once, and still, he was the son the house revolved around. Every time Mason messed up, my parents made excuses. He's just going through a phase. Boys will be boys. At least he's not off doing drugs. Meanwhile, I studied, worked, stayed out of trouble, and got ghosted. I remembered when I won 3rd place in a statewide political essay contest. I begged them to come see me receive the award at the district ceremony. They didn't show. Mason had a dentist appointment. That was the excuse. But I was still that naive kid who thought if I worked harder, helped more, they'd finally notice. Be proud. Say I mattered. Now, I had trash bags for an answer. I scrolled through old texts. Last one from Mom, bundle up. It's cold out. That was 2 weeks ago. Not a word since. I could have forgiven a warning, even a delayed conversation. But vanishing without a trace, that was choice. A very clear final one. So I made my own. If they could erase me, I'd do the same. Not out of revenge, but because I couldn't keep waiting to be loved the right way. I needed shelter. Not metaphorically, literally. I had 2 weeks before classes resumed and nowhere to go. That's when I remembered something my social policy professor, Dr. Lucinda Park, had said once in class. Family isn't always where you come from. Sometimes it's who shows up when everything else falls apart. It was late, but I emailed her anyway. Told her what happened. I didn't expect anything. Maybe some advice. A list of resources. Instead, she replied 3 hours later, "Come by in the morning. I have a guest room. No questions asked." That email made me cry harder than the phone call with Dad ever could. Not because of what she offered, but because someone saw me. In the middle of the mess. Without judgment. Just care. The next morning, I drove back to Eugene, hands clenched tight on the wheel, trying not to think about what I was leaving behind or if I'd ever get it back. Dr. Park lived in a modest house near the edge of town. Lots of ivy on the porch and mismatched mugs in the kitchen. It smelled like cinnamon and fresh laundry. She opened the door like she'd been expecting me her whole life. "You're not alone," she said, handing me a steaming mug of chamomile tea, "and you can stay for as long as you need. But fair warning, if you don't help with dishes, I'll put you on compost duty." I laughed. And just like that, something inside me cracked open. For the first time since the porch. Since the 3 trash bags. Since the silence. I laughed. Dr. Park's attic room was nothing fancy, just a sloped ceiling, a small window that overlooked the backyard, and a single bed covered in a quilt that smelled faintly of lavender. But after the motel and the hollow porch where my life had been left in bags, this room felt like the safest place in the world. I unpacked my things quietly that night, folding the red hoodie into the drawer like it still held warmth. The cracked photo frame? I slipped it into the bottom of my backpack, face down, like hiding it would dull the sting. I didn't have a plan yet, just a stubborn pulse in my chest that kept whispering, "Don't stop." The next morning, Dr. Park left a printed flyer on the kitchen counter with a sticky note on top that simply said, "You might want this." It was an internship posting from a nonprofit called Horizon Outreach. They were looking for spring and summer interns to assist with tenant rights, housing discrimination cases, and low-income rental disputes. My eyes stuck to one line, for students passionate about community justice and housing advocacy. That line felt like someone had written it just for me. I applied that afternoon, sitting at Dr. Park's kitchen table with a mug of lukewarm tea and my laptop propped up on a copy of Tenant Law for Beginners. I didn't edit my response 20 times like I usually did. I just told the truth. That I knew what it felt like to have a home disappear, to be left out of decisions that changed everything. That I wanted to help other people feel less alone when that happened to them. A week later, I got the call. A woman named Alina Cortez, the program director, invited me to interview over Zoom. She had a calm, measured voice and eyes that studied you without ever looking condescending. "Why housing law?" she asked. I took a breath and said, "Because people deserve to feel safe where they sleep. And because I know what it's like when that gets taken away without warning." She didn't nod or smile or reassure me like most interviewers would. She just said, "That's a good reason. We'll be in touch." And 2 days later, they were. I was in. The internship didn't pay much, but they covered transportation and gave interns direct access to their legal aid team, which was honestly more valuable than money. The first time I walked into their office, a converted old bakery with peeling brick walls and dusty blinds, I felt like I had stepped into something bigger than myself. There were desks crammed with folders, phones ringing every few minutes, and caseboards scrawled with sticky notes. It was organized chaos, but everyone there moved with purpose. They weren't here for show. They were here to fight. I got partnered with a law clerk named Jordan, who reminded me of a sleep-deprived greyhound, tall, fast-talking, always carrying 2 phones and a highlighter behind his ear. He handed me a stack of files my first day and said, "If you can organize this in the next 2 hours, I'll believe in miracles." I did it in 90 minutes. By the end of my first week, I'd helped prep case files for 3 emergency eviction hearings, typed up witness statements, and even sat in on a landlord mediation where the property manager tried to claim emotional disobedience as a lease violation. Jordan whispered, "Not a thing," in my ear as I took notes furiously. Each story chipped away at something in me. Not in a way that broke me, but in a way that sharpened me. There was a single mother whose apartment flooded 3 times in 4 months. A grad student being pushed out for complaining about broken heating in February. A retired factory worker who'd been living in the same unit for 19 years before his rent doubled overnight. It had all felt personal, maybe too personal. But instead of drowning in it, I started to imagine ways we could make things better. It was one of those long Thursday evenings, just Jordan and me left in the office, that I first said it out loud. "You know what's missing?" I asked, not even sure he was listening. A place for students, young people who don't know where to turn. One clear place to get answers. He looked up from his keyboard. Like a hotline? More like a support hub. Legal info, emergency contacts, community grants, something digital, something human. Jordan blinked a few times, then grinned. "If anyone could pull that off, it's you." That night, I opened a new folder on my laptop. I named it Hearthine. I didn't know what it would be yet, but I knew the idea wouldn't let me sleep. I pitched it to Alina a week later, expecting a polite nod and a maybe someday. Instead, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "Good. Now prove you can make it real." She introduced me to a university grant initiative, the Pathfinder Project. They offered up to $20,000 to students launching projects with community impact. The deadline was in 10 days. I barely slept. I wrote the proposal from scratch twice. Jordan helped me fine-tune the framework. Dr. Park sat with me in the kitchen every night, proofreading and offering questions that pushed me to think deeper. I didn't just write about students needing legal help. I wrote about what it feels like to be thrown away without explanation. About building something that says, "We see you. You're not alone." I included everything I wished I'd known that first night in the motel, staring at my ceiling, wondering if I was the problem. I submitted it with trembling hands and an adrenaline rush I hadn't felt since my last midterm. 3 weeks later, I got the email. Pathfinder had chosen Hearthline as one of their top finalists. I was getting the full grant, 20 grand. I stared at the screen, my mouth hanging open until Dr. Park walked in and saw the look on my face. "You won, didn't you?" I nodded, and she just said, "Then it begins." That's when the gears really started turning. Jordan looped in a law student from UC Berkeley who specialized in digital legal access. We built a chatbot to answer basic tenant questions and a form submission system for escalation. I reached out to the campus at Group and got help coding the site. It wasn't polished, but it worked. And more than that, it spoke in plain, direct language. No legal jargon, just support. Real and immediate. The launch happened quietly on a Monday morning. We didn't advertise, we just told 5 students. By the end of the week, the site had over 300 hits and 42 inquiries. Hearthline was real, and it was needed. What I didn't expect, what threw me completely, was what came next. The second Friday after launch, I was sorting intake forms when I got a voicemail from a number I hadn't seen in months. It was Camille. Her voice was low, uncertain. "Aria, I don't know what to say. Mom's been trying to reach you. She's been crying. She said you changed your number. I don't know what happened. I'm sorry. I miss you. I didn't know how to respond. I wasn't angry. Not anymore." But I wasn't ready either. I saved the message, didn't delete it, didn't call back. That same day, a second message came in, this time from a blocked number. It was Dad. "Aria, you need to come home. There's something we need to talk about. It's important." I listened to it 3 times. He never said the words sorry or we were wrong. Just, "You need to come home." I sat alone that night, watching the cursor blink on my laptop. Hearthline had processed over 100 new form requests. People were asking for help. Students, young moms, people sleeping in cars. I thought about the house in Medford, the porch, the cracked lamppost, and I realized something I hadn't let myself admit until that moment. I didn't want to go back. Not out of resentment, but because I'd finally found something worth staying for. I had purpose. I had people who saw me. And maybe for the first time, I was learning to see myself too. I didn't answer the calls, not out of spite, but because I no longer needed to hear what they had to say, to know what they hadn't said. No apology, no ownership, just messages that sounded like obligations disguised as concern. They were reaching out now, not when I needed shelter, Not when I stood in front of a house that no longer claimed me, but now after Hearthine made its quiet ripple. After the little platform that started in a spare room began growing faster than anyone expected. I wasn't naive. Timing spoke louder than words. Still, I didn't block their numbers. I didn't erase the voicemails. I just let them sit in silence, the same way they had left me months ago. Meanwhile, Hearthline was turning into something I hadn't dared imagine. What started as a bare-bones resource hub was now attracting students from other campuses. We added language access tools thanks to a volunteer named Mina, who was fluent in 3 dialects and had once navigated her own landlord dispute with a translation app and a Google Doc. We implemented a housing alert system that notified students of legal changes in real time, especially around eviction moratoriums. Word kept spreading, quietly but steadily. We didn't do flashy marketing. We didn't need to. The stories did the work. A freshman named Aiden came to us after being forced to leave his off-campus studio mid-semester. His landlord claimed he was too loud, but the eviction notice came 2 days after Aiden filed a maintenance request for black mold. We connected him to our legal partner, and not only did he stay, but the landlord had to pay his relocation costs for a safer unit. There was Layla, a part-time student working 2 jobs who'd been threatened with eviction because she couldn't pay a surprise pet deposit for her emotional support dog. The Hearthline chatbot guided her through her rights in real time and connected her with a lawyer. Her case was dropped within a week. These weren't just wins, they were quiet revolutions, student by student. Each one made the air in my lungs feel a little less heavy, but even in the momentum, I hadn't forgotten the voicemail from Dad. The words played in the back of my mind like a song I didn't like but couldn't shut off. You need to come home. 4 words that once would have pulled me into a car without question. Now, they meant something entirely different. They weren't a request, they were a summons, and that was the difference. I talked to Dr. Park about it one evening as we folded laundry in her living room, surrounded by half-matching socks and that familiar cinnamon scent always clinging to the air. "You don't have to go back," she said simply. "But if you do, don't go looking for closure. Go knowing you already survived without it." I didn't respond right away, but her words sat with me longer than anything Dad had said. That week, Hearthline received an invitation from a state-led community initiative to join a roundtable on student housing insecurity. It was the kind of meeting where nonprofit reps and school admins sat around polished tables and nodded a lot. I wasn't sure we belonged there. We weren't polished. We weren't funded by 6-figure grants, but we were real, and we had results. So I said yes. The event was held in a glass-paneled building near the Capitol, with water pitchers on every table and name tags that stuck awkwardly to everyone's jackets. I wore the same navy blazer I'd used for my Pathfinder presentation and told myself I belonged. At first, I just listened, but then one of the deans from a nearby private university said, "The real issue is students not understanding lease language. They need to take more responsibility." And something in me cracked. I raised my hand and said, "With respect, students aren't failing because they don't read. They're failing because no one taught them what to look for. The systems aren't broken, they were never built for us." A few people blinked. One nodded. No one interrupted. When I finished, a woman from a youth legal collective approached me and said, "Keep going. We need people like you in these rooms." 2 weeks later, Hearthline was officially added as a resource partner in 3 universities' housing support guides. The next step was building out a virtual intake team, and that meant funding. That's when Alina forwarded me a link for something called the Summit Grant, a competitive initiative that awarded $250 in multi-phase support for student-led social equity projects. It sounded too big, too structured, too perfect, but it also sounded like the one chance I had to scale what we were doing and reach thousands more like me. I started drafting every night, after intake sessions, after classes, after answering chat support messages. My proposal wasn't just about Hearthline's tech, it was about its heart, about how the platform was born from a moment no one should ever have to live through. I included impact data, volunteer rosters, growth metrics, but I also included the 3 black bags. I wrote about what it meant to be reduced to garbage on a porch, and how that moment, terrible as it was, became the seed of something that gave others a place to turn. It wasn't a business pitch. It was a promise. Submission day came and went. I closed my laptop and took a walk by the river trail just to breathe. I didn't know if it would be enough, but it was the most honest thing I'd ever written. While waiting for news, life at Hearthine kept moving. We trained 2 new peer advocates. We secured a partnership with a local legal firm willing to offer pro bono hours each month. We even launched a text-based emergency hotline for students without internet access. And in the middle of it all, the past found its way to my inbox again, this time through an email from Camille. No subject line, no greeting, just a scanned photo of me, her, and Mason at the lake when we were kids. I had my arm around her. She was smiling at something off camera. The caption she'd typed below said, "I didn't want it to happen like this." I stared at it for a long time. I knew what she meant. Maybe she hadn't agreed with how everything had gone down. Maybe she wasn't the one who made the decision, but she hadn't stopped it either. And now she was extending an olive branch in the only way she knew how: soft, small, without asking for anything. I didn't respond, but I didn't delete it either. Some things don't need immediate answers. Some things just need space. 3 days later, I received the summit grant results. I sat on the floor of Dr. Park's hallway with my laptop, my knees pulled to my chest, breath tight in my throat. The email opened with 2 words: "Congratulations, Aria." I couldn't move, couldn't think. I just read the rest with shaking hands. Hearthine had been selected, not as a runner-up, as the lead grantee. $250,000. Full mentorship, national exposure, program expansion support, a team, a future. I stood up too fast and bumped my head on the light fixture, but I didn't care. I ran down the stairs yelling, "Dr. Park, we got it." She looked up from her garden gloves, confused. Then I told her, and she hugged me so tightly, I nearly dropped the laptop. That night, I sat at the small desk in the attic room and opened a new folder. This one wasn't called Start Over or Hearthline or Resume Drafts. I named it Legacy, because that's what this was becoming. Not just a response to pain, but a blueprint, a network, a way to keep going even when everything else falls apart. As I watched the sun dip below the rooftops outside my window, I realized something I hadn't dared believe until that moment. I wasn't surviving anymore. I was building. And no matter what my parents thought they took from me when they left, they had no power over what I was creating now. After the summit grant came through, things changed faster than I could keep up with. We secured a second working space across town, a shared community office that smelled like paint and optimism. Within a month, we brought on 2 part-time staff and onboarded our first cohort of student fellows, each one of them someone who had lived through housing uncertainty, now helping others navigate it with quiet strength. Hearthline wasn't just growing, it was becoming a movement. We implemented an early response toolkit that guided students through lease termination risks, and by the end of fall, we had already intercepted 12 unjust evictions. I should have been overwhelmed, but instead, I felt something rare: stability, the kind I never had back home. There were moments, though, when the past would sneak up on me without warning. Like the way my chest tightened every time my phone rang with a Medford area code, or how I paused before unlocking the mailbox, half expecting another letter from someone who never said goodbye properly. The email came on a quiet Wednesday, buried between project updates and legal memos. Subject line: Family matter. No name, no greeting, just 2 lines. We need to speak. Face to face. Please don't ignore this. I stared at it for a long time. It didn't say who sent it, but I didn't need to guess. The tone was unmistakable. That mix of demand pretending to be invitation. I didn't respond, not right away, but I read it again, then again the next morning. And eventually I told Dr. Park. She didn't say much, just handed me a cup of tea and said, "You don't owe them a conversation, but you owe yourself the peace of choosing how it ends." That night I sent a reply. 1 sentence: "We can meet." 1 hour. Public place. I picked a small coffee shop 2 blocks from Hearthline's original office, the kind of place where silence never lingered because of clinking mugs and whispered orders. When I walked in, they were already seated. My mother in a navy cardigan, hands wrapped around her mug like she was trying to warm more than just her fingers. My father, stiff and unreadable, arms crossed. Camille sat between them, fiddling with her straw wrapper like it was the only safe place to focus her eyes. I slid into the seat across from them, straight-backed, not defensive but prepared. No one spoke for a beat too long. Then Mom broke the silence. "Arya, thank you for coming." Her voice was soft, but not quite steady. I nodded once, neutral. She looked at Dad, who didn't move, then at me. "We didn't handle things right. We know that now." I said nothing. Because what could I say that hadn't already been said in absence? She tried again. "When we moved, it wasn't supposed to be like that. We were going through a lot. Financially, emotionally, your dad's job was gone. The house was in default. Camille had her own struggles. We didn't know how to tell you without making it worse." I leaned forward, calm but clear. "So you decided not to tell me at all. You moved, left me out, and dumped my life in 3 trash bags. You didn't spare me the pain. You just removed yourselves from it." Dad looked up at that, jaw tight. "You were always strong, Arya. We thought you could handle it." I blinked. Not because I was surprised by the deflection, but because it was still the same logic avoidance dressed as trust. Camille finally spoke. "I tried to talk to them, Arya. I did. I didn't know how to fix any of it." I looked at her, and I believed her. Maybe she wasn't the architect of the decision, but she lived in the blueprint. I turned back to Mom. "You could have sent a message. One line. A call. Anything. But you chose silence. You made me think I wasn't part of the family anymore." She looked down at her cup. "You were never out of the family," she whispered. "Then why did I have to rebuild my life from a motel?" My voice wasn't raised, just measured. Why did I have to ask a professor for shelter instead of coming home? Dad exhaled like he wanted to interrupt, but didn't have the words to argue. Camille reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. "We didn't come here to erase anything. We came to acknowledge it, and if you never want to speak again after this, we'll respect that. But you should see this." She handed it to me carefully, like it might fall apart in the air. I opened it slowly. Inside was a photocopy of a legal document, an inheritance notice. The sender? A law office in Santa Fe, New Mexico. The recipient? Me. I read the words once, then again. According to the form, my late grandmother, the one on my mother's side, who passed away last year, had left behind a parcel of land that had recently been bought out for commercial development. The payout had been initiated months ago. The document showed that I was listed as the sole beneficiary. I looked up sharply. "You knew about this?" Camille answered first. "It was addressed to the house. After we moved, it came forwarded. Mom didn't know what to do with it." I turned to Mom. "You didn't think to tell me I'd inherited something?" Her lips parted. "I didn't open it at first, but when I saw what it was, I thought it had to be a mistake. Why would she leave it to you?" That hit harder than I expected. Because I used to visit her, write her, help her fix the heater when no one else did. Maybe that meant something. Dad looked down. I could see it the moment the realization hit him that the inheritance wasn't a loophole, it was a consequence, and they weren't the beneficiaries. I closed the envelope and slid it back toward Camille. I already received the transfer confirmation. The law firm reached out through the Hearthine office. "You didn't need to bring this. You just needed to be honest." No one spoke after that. Not for a while. Eventually, Mom reached across the table, but I didn't move. "You've done something amazing," she said. "We saw the article. We didn't know how far you'd come." I nodded once. "Because you weren't looking." Then I stood up. "This isn't about revenge, or money, or making you feel small. This is about boundaries. And mine are clear now." I looked at Camille. "You can stay in touch, if you choose to do it with honesty. But I won't chase closeness anymore. It has to come freely, or not at all." Then I left. Not with anger, not with tears, just a steady calm that felt like a closed door without a slam. That evening, back at Hearthline, I led our newest volunteer orientation. 18 students. Some wide-eyed, some wary, all of them walking into something bigger than they realized. I told them my usual welcome line: "We are not just a resource, we are a reminder that no one deserves to be displaced and forgotten." And for the first time, I truly felt the weight of those words return to me as truth. Later, alone in the office, I opened the legacy folder again and updated the timeline. We were nearing 2,000 documented cases. Over half had ended in positive outcomes. Several were still active, and a few had become legal precedents thanks to our partners. I stared at the numbers for a moment, not to boast but to breathe them in. Evidence that the fire I dragged from my family's abandonment had lit more than just survival. It had become shelter. The next morning, we received a request from a national social impact summit looking for community leaders to speak about student-initiated reform models. Alina forwarded the invite with one line, "It's your turn." I didn't hesitate. I clicked accept. I didn't sleep the night before the summit. Not because I was nervous, but because my mind kept circling the same question. What do you say to a room full of people when the most powerful thing you've built was born from being left behind? I watched the clock flip from 3:42 to 4:15 and finally got out of bed. I sat at the small kitchen table in Dr. Park's house with nothing but tea and silence, trying to find the exact words that wouldn't sound rehearsed or hollow or borrowed from someone else's brochure. By the time the sun rose, I still didn't have a script, just a series of memories that burned too vividly to forget. The summit was held in a high-rise conference hall in downtown Portland, with polished glass walls and coffee stations at every corner. Everyone wore name tags and carried sleek notebooks and asked questions like they already knew the answers. I wore a simple black blazer over a white blouse. No jewelry, no flash, just clarity. As I stood backstage, I could hear the tail end of the panel before mine, a roundtable on tech and justice, filled with phrases like data equity and community pipelines. It sounded smart. It also felt detached. I wasn't here to impress with vocabulary. I was here to tell the truth. When they called my name, the applause was polite, automatic. I walked to the podium, adjusted the mic, and took a breath that felt heavier than my lungs could hold. My name is Aria Delgado. I'm a political science student, a housing rights advocate, and the founder of Hearthine, a support hub built for students who've been pushed out, priced out, or shut out of stable housing. But more than that, I'm someone who knows what it feels like to come home and find out you no longer have one. The room stilled. I kept going. Hearthine wasn't born in a boardroom. It started after my family moved without telling me, leaving 3 trash bags on the porch. No warning, no goodbye. Just a message from my dad saying I was an adult now and should figure it out. So I did. And in doing that, I discovered that what broke me also pointed me toward every student like me who never asked for help because they didn't think they were allowed to. I talked about how we built the platform from a borrowed attic, how the first hotline was just me answering emails between classes, how the stories kept coming, each one different, but always echoing the same need to be seen, to be heard, to have someone on your side when the locks change, or the rent spikes, or the silence becomes unbearable. I didn't try to sound noble. I didn't pretend we had it all figured out. I told them we were still building, still learning, still listening. And maybe that's why it worked. Because when I finished, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt full. Then the room clapped, not out of obligation, but like they meant it. After the panel, people came up to me one by one. Some shook my hand. Others handed me cards. One woman, maybe in her 60s, just touched my arm and said, "Thank you for saying what too many people are still too scared to admit." That evening, I returned to Eugene, exhausted but calm. The kind of calm that only comes after doing something that matters. The next morning, Hearthline's inbox was flooded with new partnership inquiries, student testimonies, legal clinics asking to collaborate. But in the middle of it all sat one short message, subject line, from Grandma's lawyer. I clicked it without thinking, and up came a scanned letter from Cruz and Moreno, the firm that had handled the land inheritance. The message confirmed the sale had finalized, and after taxes and legal transfers, the total amount now deposited into a trust in my name was $389,250. More than a number, it was a symbol of everything I hadn't been given and everything I was now choosing to give to others. I didn't tell many people, only Dr. Park, Alina, and one of the fellows helping with our financial forecasting. We agreed to use a portion to fund a long-term emergency housing grant within Hearthline, and anonymous fund students could apply for when faced with imminent displacement. We named it the Porch Fund, not because I wanted to remember the porch where it started, but because I knew I wasn't the only one who'd ever stood in front of a locked door with nowhere to go. A few weeks later, as the buzz from the summit faded into planning meetings and project milestones, I received a handwritten letter in my mailbox, rare, unannounced. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, familiar cursive on the front. My mother's writing. I sat with it for a long time before opening it. Inside were 4 pages of words, real words. She admitted what she hadn't before, that she and Dad knew about the inheritance, that the decision to leave without telling me wasn't rushed or accidental, it was calculated, that they had hoped somehow I would just forget or forgive. She said Camille had fought with them over it, and that things at home were no longer peaceful, that they had seen the article from the summit and it shook them. We are proud of you, even if we don't deserve to say that anymore. Her final line was simple. We are not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know we finally saw it. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, not out of rejection, but because I didn't need to hold it every day to know it existed. Forgiveness, I was learning, wasn't a door I had to open on anyone else's timeline. It wasn't even a door I had to open at all. Sometimes it was enough to know I wasn't trapped behind it anymore. The next month passed in a blur of logistics. We secured a speaking spot at 2 regional student leadership conferences. Hearthine was named a finalist for a National Youth Service Award. I started mentoring 3 new fellows, bright, committed students who reminded me of myself, but also not at all, because they were walking into a support system I hadn't had. That, more than anything, made me realize we were doing something real, not perfect, but rooted. The kind of roots you build yourself when no one else leaves you any. One rainy Friday, while walking home after a long day of back-to-back intakes, I stopped by a bookstore and saw a small journal in the window. On the cover, in gold letters, it said, "We begin again." I bought it without flipping a page. That night I opened it and wrote down one sentence. The most powerful thing I ever did was choose not to return to the place that erased me. I didn't write it out of bitterness. I wrote it because it was finally true. I had stopped orbiting around the people who left. I was no longer fueled by the need to prove anything. What I had now, peace, clarity, impact, was mine. Not because they gave it to me, but because I stopped waiting for them to do so. The following week, Hearthine launched our statewide housing literacy campaign, focused on reaching community colleges and rural campuses. We called it Project Anchor. The tagline was simple: every student deserves to stay. Within the first month, 10 schools signed on. One even invited us to help build it into their freshman orientation. That was the same day I received an invite from a documentary team producing a short series on grassroots student activism. They asked if I'd be willing to participate. I hesitated at first. It felt personal, too exposed. But then I remembered how many stories I'd only believed because someone else had told theirs first. So I said yes. We started filming in late March. They shadowed our office, captured student consults with permission, followed me to speaking events, and even sat in during a team meeting where one of the new fellows pitched an idea that would later become our housing resource map. The director, a soft-spoken woman named Lee, asked me during the last shoot, "Do you ever wish things had gone differently, that they hadn't left you out?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I looked around the room, our team, our whiteboard filled with plans, our porch fund binder stacked with stories, and said, I used to, but not anymore. Because if they hadn't left, I might never have realized I could build a home with my own hands. And not just for me. Spring came in quietly, like it was trying not to interrupt. The mornings were no longer sharp with frost, but soft with early light, and outside the Hearthine office window, the cherry blossoms along the path began to open like they had been holding their breath all winter. I found myself watching them every day before meetings, not because they were extraordinary, but because they reminded me that growth isn't loud. It happens in silence, in patience, in the background of all the noise. Hearthine was thriving, but not in the showy way people expected. We weren't chasing media, we weren't counting clicks. We were tracking moments, the kind of moments that could have changed everything for someone like me if they had arrived just a little sooner. A sophomore from Salem, who almost dropped out after losing her off-campus housing, came to us and left with a new lease, a small emergency grant, and a feeling she later described as being able to breathe again. A trans student from Coos Bay found us during finals week after being told his identity wasn't a good fit for his current landlord's family home. We didn't fix everything, but we got him time, protection, and a bridge. These were the stories I carried with me like steady stones in my pocket, not because they were mine, but because they reminded me why I had to keep going. I'd moved out of Dr. Park's house by then. It felt right, like the next natural chapter, but we still had tea every other week. She always greeted me the same way, hands dusted with flour or soil, saying, "Still changing the world one eviction at a time?" And I'd smile and say, "Just trying to keep the lights on." The truth was, the lights were more than on, they were glowing. We had launched our housing literacy toolkit in 6 languages. Our chatbot had answered over 5,000 live questions. And thanks to the Porch Fund, no student who'd reached out in the last 4 months had ended up on the street. But impact doesn't always silence old echoes. Some nights, I still had dreams of the porch. Not dramatic nightmares, just flashes of standing there, seeing those 3 bags again, hearing my father's voice say I should figure it out. In the dream, I never responded. I just turned and walked away. And every time I woke up, I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. I was just clear. The documentary aired mid-April. It wasn't flashy. Just 30 minutes of quiet footage, voices, faces, questions, and a single story threaded through it all mine. I watched it alone in my apartment, curled under a quilt that I had bought myself during a sale last winter. When it ended, I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I just sat there, heart steady, realizing that it was the first time my story had been told without someone else's edits, expectations, or apologies shaping it. The next morning, Hearthline's inbox lit up again. Students, community leaders, even someone from the State Youth Housing Board asking if I'd be open to discussing state-level pilot programs. I forwarded it to our legal team with a simple line, "Let's talk next steps." That same afternoon, a small brown envelope arrived at our office with no return address. Inside was a letter from Camille. Just 1 page. "I watched the documentary it began." I cried. "Not because you blamed us, you didn't, but because I finally saw the weight we left you to carry. I'm not writing to ask for anything. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For not standing up for you sooner. For staying quiet when I should have spoken. You didn't deserve that. You never did." At the bottom, she'd added, "I hope one day, if it's right, we can sit together and talk. Not as sisters from the same house, but as people who know what it means to begin again." I folded the letter slowly and placed it in the drawer next to my grandmother's photo. I didn't respond that day. I didn't need to. Some words are meant to sit, to breathe on their own. That evening, as the Hearthline team wrapped up a staff meeting, one of our new fellows, Miles, a junior who used to live out of his car for 3 weeks, raised his hand. "Have you ever thought about what comes next?" he asked. "Like after all this? After school? After Hearthline is not new anymore?" I looked around the room, at faces I'd come to rely on, at plans scribbled on whiteboards, at the laughter that still echoed after hard days. And then I said what I hadn't allowed myself to admit before. I don't think Hearthline was ever just about now. I think it was always meant to last longer than us. Miles nodded. Someone else clapped softly. And I realized in that moment that the most radical thing I had done wasn't building a platform or getting a grant or standing on a stage. It was giving people a place to come in from the cold, not just physically, but emotionally, legally, personally, a place where silence didn't win. 2 months later, I stood on stage at the State Youth Leadership Forum, staring out at a packed auditorium. I opened with the same line I'd first used at the summit, but this time it felt different, stronger, settled. "My name is Aria Delgado. I was once left behind. Now I help make sure others aren't." The applause came before I even reached the next sentence. Later that evening, I walked outside into the warm dusk, the sky glowing the way it does when summer starts to show up early. I thought about the house in Medford. I hadn't driven past it. I didn't plan to. Some places lose the right to be called home when they choose to close their doors. I had created my own, not with drywall or deeds, but with intention, with fire, with a quiet insistence that I mattered, that others did too. When I returned to Eugene, I found a package waiting. No sender, just my name. Inside was the original graduation photo, the one I'd found cracked in the trash bag on the porch. But this one was whole, fixed, cleaned, reframed. With it, a single note written in shaky handwriting. She would have been proud. "We just didn't know how to show it, Dad." I stared at it for a while, not with anger, not with longing, but with peace. I set the photo on my bookshelf, not because I needed it there, but because it no longer had power over me. It was history, not a wound, and that distinction was everything. The following week, Hearthine launched its first satellite chapter in Southern Oregon. When we chose the city, people asked if I wanted to avoid going back. I said no. We weren't opening the office for me. We were opening it for the ones still standing in front of locked doors, the ones holding plastic bags full of memories, the ones checking their phones, waiting for answers that never come. And if any of them walked through our doors, they wouldn't get silence. They'd get help. They'd get dignity. They'd get the start I wish I had. On the morning of the launch, I stood by the office entrance as students filed in, some laughing, some nervous, some already mid-crisis. I greeted every one of them by name, and as I stood there, the sunlight hit just right, casting a warm line across the floor. I thought about the night I first slept in that motel, about the attic room in Dr. Park's home, about the cracked lamppost and the red hoodie and the way my fingers shook as I gathered pieces of a life that no longer fit. And I realized I wasn't carrying those things anymore. I wasn't gathering fragments. I was building foundations. Not for the family I lost, but for the family I found, the family I made, the one that walked beside me not out of obligation, but out of belief. And so when people now ask me what Hearthine is, I tell them it's a shelter, yes, but it's also a choice. A choice to refuse invisibility. A choice to rewrite what family means. A choice to turn the echo of abandonment into the architecture of belonging. Because sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't retaliation, it's redemption. Not through being welcomed back, but through walking forward so far and so fully that going back is no longer even a thought. I once stood on a porch alone. Now I open doors for others. Story 2. In the kitchen I used to call home, I sat down on the white-painted wooden chair and faced my parents and my 2 younger brothers. The air was filled with the smells of garlic bread and pot roast, which brought back memories of my early years' family dinners. However, something felt different tonight. My twin brothers, Nathan and Lucas, reclined back in their seats with victorious looks on their faces. After a brief glance between my parents, David and Margaret, my mother spoke in a precisely calibrated voice. We would want to discuss a crucial choice with you. As I put down my fork, I start to feel tense. Then my father went on, his voice firm but cold. We finalized our will, and we want to tell you about it right now, in order to avoid misunderstanding later. A smug grin appeared on Nathan's lips as he leaned back and folded his arms across his chest. It everything goes to us, to put it simply. I went cold. What? Lucas spoke it again in a casual voice, as though making a trivial announcement. We will inherit all of Mom and Dad's possessions, including this house, the beach, and the condo. Nothing is given to you, with the exception of the distant buzz of traffic from the peaceful suburban street outside. The room abruptly became quiet. My mother gave me a short, firm nod, but I looked to her in the hopes that she would refute what I had just heard. Grasping the napkin in her lap, she stated, "We believe this is for the best. You make a good living and have a steady job, but Lucas and Nathan are still figuring things out. They require further assistance." Waiting for an explanation, I turned to face my father. There was a hint of uncertainty, but he just avoided my eyes and gazed down at his glass of water. My chest ached, and I felt a flash of wrath. For them, I had done everything. I had paid a significant amount of their mortgage, several medical expenses, and even assisted Nathan and Lucas on several occasions when they were unable to manage their own finances for more than 10 years. They now paid me back in this manner. You've concluded that I don't deserve anything in light of what I've done. I tried to speak steadily, but my voice faltered. However, I was unable to conceal my intense hurt from others. My mom let out a sigh. Disappointment clouded her gaze. "Evelyn, you make money the center of all you do." My hands squeezed beneath the table. Betrayal is stabbing me with a searing sting. "Money isn't the point," I said, attempting to seem calm. "It has to do with justice, about how I've been there all along, anytime you needed me. But now, just because I'm self-sufficient, therefore I'm not dependent on you. This family doesn't regard me at all." Nathan shook his head and gave a little giggle. "You're exaggerating. You were not coerced into helping. You simply enjoyed being the martyr." Lucas's eyes flickered as he laughed in enjoyment. "Perhaps you believed that your parents would love you just as much as they love us, if you threw enough money to us." I felt like I was slapped across the face by his remarks. I looked to my parents in the hopes that they would rebuke him and chastise him for his brutality. However, nothing. They said nothing. And I realized everything in that quiet. My throat swelled as I swallowed forcefully. I inhaled deeply and examined myself. "Okay," my voice replied. "I have one of my own, even if that's your choice." Nathan's eyebrow went up. "And what's that too?" With my heart racing, I pulled my chair back and sprang to my feet. "Don't expect anything from me from now on." Their astonished looks and the once comforting aroma of pot roast and garlic bread were gone as I looked away from the dinner table. I went out the door feeling empty and pointless. Nobody stops me. My name was not called, without hesitation, and I realized that everything had changed at that precise instant. I left the home where I had been raised. However, there was no feeling of familiarity or lasting attachment this time. The security of childhood and the coziness of family meals had long since diminished. Behind me, the door snapped shut with an irrevocable finality. Even though it was a cool night, I could feel the heat rising to my temples. I didn't turn on the radio like I normally did on the way home. I needed the quiet to take it all in. Why even was I taken aback? I had understood all along that I was only their financial security net in their eyes. I fell back on the couch in my flat. I shook my hands as I opened my phone. Every phrase pierced deeper as the exchange played back in my mind. Lucas and Nathan were getting it all, as well as myself. The person who had sent Lucas money when he desired a new automobile for his social media persona, who had paid Nathan's tuition each time he changed majors, and who had compensated for their blunders. I had nothing left. I launched the banking app. Like a cruel reminder, the figures glared back at me. $1,900 every month, the sum I had been giving my folks to pay their bills and mortgage. Every time Nathan and Lucas contacted to complain about money issues, they received an additional $1, $200. My parents said that I was self-sufficient and successful, but what would happen to them if I didn't help them? Was their house even theirs? I moved my finger over the portion that dealt with automated transfers. My ears throbbed with my heartbeat. I had taken on this weight as my own for many years. However, they made this decision. I wasn't needed by them. That was obvious. Nobody was pressuring me to go on. 2 seconds, 1 second, I hit the cancel button. A notice appeared. Successfully, recurring payments were halted. I was overcome with emotion, rage, and resentment. And something else too, let go. I put my phone down and sank into the couch, relieved that I had been carrying a burden for too long. I had trouble sleeping that night. I lay awake, mentally reliving the previous years. The late evenings working overtime to give Nathan his school money. The holidays I had foregone to pay their mortgage. The sacrifices I had made because I thought they were important. Now, however, I only needed a tiny bit of recognition now. One indication that I was valued. I couldn't even get that from them. My phone kept ringing the next morning. Mom. I was hesitant to respond. Evelyn? Have you canceled the payment for this month? She covered it up with that usual tone of disappointment, but her voice was keen with fear. I inhaled deeply. Yes, Mother. Because I came to the realization that I no longer need to do this. She remained quiet for a while. What are you saying? Family members help one another. We depend on that money to pay our bills, you know? I gritted my teeth and spoke steadily. Mom, you only care about family when I'm footing the bill. I've been assisting for years. However, I still mean nothing to you in the end. You're being self-centered, Evelyn. She raised her voice. Why are you behaving in this manner? Only due to the will? It's not all about the money. It wasn't amusement that made me laugh. It has nothing to do with money. The bills were paid for you by me, for the whole family. Why don't you ask Nathan and Lucas to look after you instead if money isn't an issue? On the other end of the line, there was silence. I could see my mother's face when she was confronted, angry and frustrated. It's unbelievable how you're behaving. At last she spoke. I didn't raise this, Evelyn. I felt the weight in my chest as I closed my eyes. This is me, Mom. However, you didn't actually see me. Before she could continue, I hung up. As I stood there in my apartment, I felt a range of emotions. I knew she would give me another call. Dad may attempt to. Additionally, Nathan and Lucas would undoubtedly join in with their derision or charges. However, I didn't feel compelled to respond for the first time in my life. The family no longer used me as their ATM. The burden was not solely on me anymore. It was the best thing I had ever done to let go. I set my phone down on the table, feeling both weightless and heavy at the same time. Mom had said exactly what I expected, accusing me of selfishness, of betrayal, of abandoning the family. But what she didn't realize was that I had heard those words so many times that they had lost all meaning. I looked around my apartment, suddenly seeing it in a new light. It was no longer just a stopover between work and endless bank transfers to my family. I owned it. The only space where I didn't have to carry anyone else's burdens. I opened my laptop, pulled up my bank statement. The list of monthly expenses stared back at me. Transfers to my parents, to Nathan, to Lucas. A constant reminder of the dependency they had placed on me. No more. I canceled them one by one, each confirmation feeling like a sharp, clean cut from the past. $1,900 for the mortgage gone. $600 for utilities. Lost. I sat there staring at the screen, which now showed no active recurring payments. And for the first time in years, I felt free. But strangely, an emptiness crept in. I had spent so much time, so much effort, being the responsible daughter, the one who carried what Nathan and Lucas were never asked to. Now, without those obligations, what was I supposed to do with myself? I stood up, poured a glass of water, sipping it slowly outside the window. The city buzzed on, life moving forward. And yet I felt like I had just stepped into an entirely new world, one where I could set the rules. My phone vibrated. A message from Lucas. "What the hell are you doing? Nathan just told me you cut off the money. Do you think this is funny?" I read it but didn't reply. A few minutes later, another message popped up from Nathan. "This time, you're a traitor. Don't expect anyone in this family to see you as one of us ever again." I smirked. Not because I was happy, but because I finally saw the truth. I was never truly part of this family. I was just their sponsor. I put my phone down, stepped onto the balcony. The night breeze brushed against my skin, cool and refreshing. I inhaled deeply. I had done the right thing, and nothing would make me turn back. Right now, my phone kept ringing the next morning. I didn't even need to check the screen to know who it was. Slowly, I picked it up. Mom's voice burst through the speaker before I could even say hello. "Evelyn, what are you thinking?" she nearly shouted, her voice a mixture of anger and desperation. "Why did you cancel the payments?" We need that money to cover the bills." I closed my eyes, inhaling deeply. "Mom, I can't do this anymore. I've helped enough." "Helped? You're abandoning your family? Have you even thought about how this impacts us? We sacrificed so much for you, and this is how you repay us." I let out a dry chuckle. "Sacrificed. Do you not see the irony in that? If I owe you for rearing me, haven't I already paid you back by funding this entire family?" Mom hesitated, but then her voice got harsher. "You've changed, Evelyn. You let money dominate you." "No, Mom. You let money dominate you," I answered, my voice remarkably calm. "But I'm not your personal bank anymore." She let out a big sigh and ended the call without saying anything else. I gazed at the display. Then there were additional flashing messages. "Nathan, you lack gratitude. You're the reason Mom is sobbing. You believe you're quite intelligent, Lucas. One day you'll regret this. Nathan. When our parents are no longer with us, don't bother attending their funeral." Every message was read by me. I feel anger seething under my skin. Not a single query about why I had done it, not a single apology. The way they had treated me throughout the years didn't matter to them. Simply put, they were upset that I no longer provided financial support for their life. Once more, the phone rang. I let it ring this time, Dad. It continued to ring. After turning off the ringer, it entered my settings and removed Nathan Lock. "Lucas, lock the block, Mom." After finishing, I put my phone down, closed my eyes, and let out a breath. My flat was silent, an uncommon and strange sound. The ringing has stopped. No more guilt trip-filled texts, no more deceit. I took a whiff of the clear morning air as I went out onto my balcony. In addition to feeling alien, this work was very liberating. I felt really free for the first time in years. There was stillness for 3 weeks. No more persistent phone calls. No more Mom's guilt-ridden texts. I started to think that they had finally come to terms with the fact that I was no longer their source of financial security. Then one Friday night, I saw a message on my screen. 7:00 p.m. tomorrow is the family meeting time. Avoid being late. Brief cult. No justification. I read the message from my mother. I feel as though my chest is sinking. Perhaps this was the final opportunity for things to improve, yet a lesser but persistent part of me wanted to dismiss it. Perhaps they genuinely wanted to talk to me honestly after everything that had transpired. I made the decision to go. The tension in the living room was oppressive when I first arrived at my parents' house. Lucas and Nathan were sat on the couch already. Their faces were icy, their arms folded. My mother sat in the recliner while my father stood by the fireplace. She appeared to have been sobbing since her eyes were swollen and red. My mother spoke before I could. "I no longer comprehend you, Evelyn." Her voice faltered. "To what far would you like to ruin this family?" I scowled. "What are you discussing?" My father exhaled deeply. "We're in significant financial problems because of you. If you continue to be obstinate, your mom is going to lose it." There was no comedy in my laughter. I am now the cause of mom's fatigue. What about all the years I provided for this family? At the time, she appeared to be doing okay. Nathan shook his head and scoffed. "You make money the center of all you do. Do you truly believe that you are the center of the universe?" Lucas crossed his arms in contempt and leaned forward. "Come on, you lead a luxurious life and have a wonderful career. Why do you think this is such a huge deal? You're simply paying for your selfishness." Their remarks were profound. All I got was pressure and manipulation. Even though I had came here expecting a sincere talk, I steadied myself by taking a big breath. "Don't waste your time if this is the reason you called me here." "I'm not returning." My mom's expression became blank. "Just what did you say?" I got up and gave the home one last glance. I have made every effort to become a member of this family. However, I don't need that type of affection if my value to you is only determined by my income. I turned and headed for the door, but no one spoke. I was not stopped. This time, I was gone for good. When I got back to my apartment late one night, 2 days later, I knew right once that something was up. Industrial foam had been used to seal the frame and handle of my front door. I extended my hand and felt the cold, solidified substance. This had been done deliberately by someone. With my heart thumping in my ears, I retreated a step. This was no innocuous practical joke. This was a deliberate move to prevent me from entering my own house. I immediately reached for my phone and looked at the security camera in the hallway. I fast forward to the earlier part of the video that night. Then Lucas appeared, clad in a sweatshirt and a baseball cap, yet his stance and gait were distinct. He filled every nook and cranny of my door with foam spray cans while grinning. Anger made my hands shake. I didn't think twice. I made a police call. I gave the cops the video as proof when they got there. As he viewed the video, one of them nodded. "Do you wish to file charges?" I held on to my phone. I feel a shiver go down my back. It will only become worse if I ignore this. Lucas wasn't only upset. He was prepared to go to extreme lengths to exact revenge. I inhaled deeply while maintaining a fixed look. I want him to answer for this. My phone rang once again the following day. I choose to disregard it. Next, Dad. Next, Nathan. At last, I lifted Evelyn up. The cops called your brother in. How could you harm your own family in this way? Despite my father's angry tone, I answered coolly, "Lucas damaged my belongings. He must cover the damages if he want to avoid being charged." My dad's voice trailed off. "What is the amount?" I didn't think twice. $3,000. "In what way might you extort your own brother?" I laughed a little dryly. "Dad, it's not extortion. We call it consequences." The next morning, a $3,000 transfer with a sour note was made to my account. "I hope to never see you again." I felt nothing as I read the message. My phone flashed up with a notification from a distant relative. A message. "Is this true, Evelyn? People claim that despite your family's difficulties, you abandoned them." I scowled. There was another message. "Evelyn, how could you have severed your ties to your brothers and parents? They looked after you, your entire existence." As soon as I accessed social media, I realized what was going on. The tale my mother had been telling was utterly untrue. She had claimed in a lengthy Facebook post that I had abandoned my family during their difficult period, that I had left my old parents and suffering brothers with little, because I was self-centered and only thought about myself. The comments were overflowing with people who were unaware of the whole situation, pleading with her and demonizing me. I read over the comments. It's quite sad when successful kids lose sight of their origins. For their children, parents give up everything, and they receive this gratitude. Evelyn must have been influenced by money. My chest erupted in anger, because my own family had changed the story and made me the antagonist, not because of the outsider's criticism. I had paid most of my parents' mortgage, but they didn't mention it. They didn't mention that I had paid Nathan and Lucas's tuition, bills, and even personal costs. They failed to mention that I had to contact the police to defend myself when Lucas damaged my residence. All they depicted was a cold-hearted daughter who abandoned her family. I pondered for a few minutes while I sat in silence. Should I say nothing, disregard everything, and let them steer the conversation? No. Too long had I been subjected to their manipulation. I tapped on new post after opening my app. Let me be honest, if my family want to make this public, I then got to work writing. I explained everything. All the money I'd sent throughout the previous decade. I utilized the money to assist them pay for education, maintain their home, and even buy new automobiles and go trips with Nathan and Lucas. I mentioned that they had never viewed me as a sister or daughter, but rather as an ATM. I had to call the police when I revealed that Lucas had used industrial foam to shut the entrance of my flat. I didn't abandon my loved ones. I was never considered a member of my family, except if I was bringing in cash. I now decide to advocate for myself. I clicked post. My post created a stir in a matter of hours. The relatives began to inquire. Since they had never heard of these items before, some people responded in amazement. I received a private message from an aunt who wanted to know if I had been providing for my family for years. Even some members of my extended family started criticizing my mother for lying. But my personal family had the most outspoken response. Mom phoned right away. I replied. She was so angry that her speech was almost unintelligible. "What on earth did you just do, Evelyn?" I didn't panic. "Mom, if you have the right to share your version, then I have the right to share the truth." She was out of breath. "This family is being humiliated by you. Your father refuses to leave the house because he is so embarrassed. Have you considered Nathan and Lucas's feelings about this?" I gripped my phone firmly. Did they consider my feelings when Lucas damaged my house? When I broke my back to pay their debts, did they have me on their mind? She stopped talking. She then misrepresented the facts, as usual. "Your actions are ruining this family." Her tone became icy. "You can't expect to return if you do this. We are not related anymore." I inhaled deeply and closed my eyes. "It was you, Mom, not me, who ruined our family." I then hung up. No regrets, no tears. I was relieved for the first time in my life. My family was gone. Perhaps, however, they were never really my family in the first place. I didn't hear my mother's voice again until that phone call. My entire family became silent after I posted. Nathan will no longer send irate texts. My father will no longer call in rage. They cut off all communication as though I had never been there. However, I didn't feel bad about it this time. I had freedom. The stillness was strange at first. Now it was my turn to spend the evenings resolving my family's financial issues. No more last-minute, desperate calls. No more postponed plans because I was required. I poured all of my efforts into a big project that my employer was working on. I finished it ahead of time and got promoted since I was so focused on it. The day I got my letter of promotion, through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my new office, I could see the city below. I'm feeling pleased. I was able to appreciate my accomplishment for the first time in my life without feeling pressured to tell anyone about it. I then made the decision to go on a trip. Every time I considered spending money on myself, I was drawn back to my obligations, even though I had always wanted to take a lengthy vacation. Nothing was stopping me now, though. When the plane touched down in Florence, I purchased a ticket to Italy. I had the impression that I was entering a whole different reality. The streets with cobblestones and the cafes outside that smelled like cappuccino. Stories of the past are whispered by the old structures. I felt more alive than ever as a result of everything. I spent hours at museums admiring Renaissance masterpieces I had only ever seen in books, and I meandered around Florence's winding alleys. As the sun sank over the terracotta roofs, I sipped rich red wine and ate the freshest pasta I had ever tasted. I had stopped worrying about other people all the time. My family no longer had me as their bank account. I was myself. I was sipping a nice cappuccino at a little cafe close to Piazza della Signoria one late afternoon. You seem to enjoy this sight a lot. I raised my head and met a stranger's kind eyes. He had easy confidence, a laid-back grin, and light brown hair. I suppose this city has captured my heart. I smiled slightly in response. As though we had known one another for years, he pulled out a chair and sat across from me without asking, after taking a taste of my coffee. I agree. Oh, he said, I've returned 3 times now. I arched an eyebrow. You might say that he was a faithful traveler. Alex is my name. Evelyn. We had a lengthy conversation. He was an interior designer from New York who was passionate in European architecture. He spoke in a steady, quiet tone that occasionally included unforced comedy. I was unable to recall the last time I had a conversation with someone free from stress and pressure. There was no pretense or expectation when it came to Alex. It was just a random meeting and a sincere bond between 2 strangers. He grinned as I got up to go. I'd be delighted to accompany you if you ever desire company when touring Florence. After a brief moment of hesitation, I nodded. I believe I would enjoy it. The days that followed seemed like a dream. As the golden sunset illuminated the sky, Alex and I strolled along the Arno River, tried gelato, and explored local markets. You didn't inquire about my relatives. He didn't ask me about my history. He simply recognized me for who I was. I felt appreciated for the first time in my life when I saw a lady embrace her independence. Not because I have obligations or money, but simply because I am who I am. We were sitting on a rooftop patio one evening when I looked out at the bright city lights and grinned to myself. I used to think that my family was the key to my happiness. I used to believe that they would love me the way I wanted to be loved if I offered enough. I didn't have to plead for affection from individuals who never genuinely appreciated me, though. I could make myself happy. And right here, beneath the starry sky of Italy, I was aware that I was doing just that. I returned to my life after my trip to Italy, but I had a completely different perspective. The Evelyn who gave up everything for a family that never valued her was no longer me. I had never felt stronger, more liberated, or more like myself. The next months were quiet. Work flourished. I finally embraced the life I had put on hold for too long, made new friends, and enrolled in Sunday yoga courses. However, rumors about my former family began to circulate. My phone buzzed as I was brewing coffee. A note from my mother's cousin, Aunt Linda. Evelyn, your parents are having a lot of difficulties, even though I know you no longer care about the family. Your mother does hourly cleaning jobs, while your father works night shifts at a warehouse. Both of them appear worn out. I stopped and looked at the screen for a while. When I was providing for them financially, I had anticipated this. My parents never once thought about being independent. Without ever considering if I was worn out, they depended on me as a lifeline. And they had to deal with reality now that I had interrupted them. Without responding, I put my phone down. A buddy informed me a few days later that Lucas was still pursuing his goal of being a social media influencer, and that Nathan had lost his job as a result of subpar work, but failing to make any progress. I no longer felt accountable for them, and I wasn't shocked either. They had the opportunity to grow up and become self-sufficient, but they chose not to. They now had to deal with the fallout from their own decisions. I used to worry that I would feel lonely if I didn't get to spend Christmas with my parents and brothers. But as the vacation drew nearer, I understood that what really important was that I had friends who genuinely cared about me. Daisy showed up early with a basket of baked cookies and a big embrace. When I decided to have a little party at my flat, she murmured, "I'm so proud of you, Evelyn," as I ushered her inside. I grinned. The only member of the family who has ever stated it to me is you. Daisy's eyes were sorrowful and compassionate as she gazed at me. I just wish they had recognized your value sooner rather than later. I didn't answer. Rather, I welcomed her inside and poured her a drink of wine. My pals came one by one with wine, sweets, and laughing. I laughed harder that whole night than I had ever laughed at a Christmas. Being content on my own terms means that there is no pressure to live up to anyone's expectations or have a forced discussion. I was standing on my balcony at midnight, looking out at the city's sparkling Christmas lights, when I had a sensation I had never experienced before. There are no longer unseen weights or feelings of being exploited, only me. The folks that genuinely loved me for who I was and my life, and I could never have asked for a better Christmas present than that. I saw the city lights bounce off my window while I sat in my recliner. The world outside continued to move. The streets were bright with people and cars. However, there was a silence within me that I had never experienced before. I used to think that family was everything, and that I had to make sacrifices for them regardless of how they treated me. I had persuaded myself that they would eventually accept and adore me if I put in enough effort and provided enough. The reality, however, had been quite different. Blood is not the only factor that defines a family. People who value you make up your family, individuals who don't exploit you, people who adore you unconditionally, and Nathan and Lucas, my parents. That was the first time they had ever really considered me family. I recalled how they had excluded me from the will, perhaps as a last declaration that my only value to them was my money. They thought I would be broken by that I would plead for their approval once more. However, they were unaware that they had unintentionally given me the best present of all. The final link between us has been destroyed by them. They had released me. I used to be a lady who was overburdened with obligations, demands, and unappreciated sacrifices. However, I now had the ability to make my own life decisions. I could do anything, travel anywhere, and never have to worry about getting a call asking for money or feeling guilty for defying their demands. I could be among individuals who genuinely cared about me, friends who supported me when I was at my lowest, Aunt Daisy, who had always been there for me in silence. For the first time in my life, I was able to freely love and be loved. My gaze strayed to the phone resting on the table. No calls from my relatives were missed. They had released me. And I wasn't scared of it for the first time in my life. I picked up my glass of wine and sipped it slowly, allowing the warmth to permeate my body. My family used to be my life. Right now, I made the decision to live for myself. It wasn't selfish either. Freedom was that. Evelyn's tale is more than simply her own. It depicts a reality that many individuals in society must deal with. Family, we are taught, is the safest place. There is always a cost associated with love. However, the reality is that admiration isn't necessarily a result of family ties. It's not always selfish to leave. It's your sole line of defense. You have every right to prioritize yourself when you are continuously being used and when your sacrifices are not acknowledged. Because this life is ultimately yours. How do you feel about the story of Evelyn? Would you continue to make sacrifices for your family if you were in her shoes? Or would you leave to rediscover who you are? Leave a comment with your ideas. In order to avoid missing any more poignant tales about life and family, remember to subscribe to the channel